What if everything you believed about peace was a lie? What if the most terrifying species in the galaxy wasn't the one with the sharpest claws, the deadliest venom, or the most advanced weapons, but the one that chose to put them away? In the prestigious halls of the Galactic War Academy, where the universe's most elite alien students study the art of conflict, there exists one forbidden archive. One classified file that no student has ever been permitted to access. It bears a simple label that has haunted military strategists for centuries: species classification, human combat status, indefinitely suspended. 3 brilliant alien cadets are about to break that seal. What they discover will shatter their understanding of warfare, challenge everything they've been taught about strength, and reveal why an entire galactic council trembles at the thought of one small blue planet's inhabitants ever returning to the battlefield. The truth isn't just classified, it's quarantined. Because some knowledge, once learned, can never be unlearned. And some species, once awakened, can never be stopped. Prepare yourself for a revelation that will redefine what it means to be truly dangerous in a universe full of predators. The students think they're uncovering ancient history. They're actually about to witness the birth of their worst nightmare. The classification was never about protecting other species from humans. It was about protecting humans from themselves. The crystalline spires of the Galactic War Academy pierced the crimson sky of Nexus Prime like ancient spears frozen in time. Within its translucent walls, the most brilliant military minds from across 17 different star systems gathered to study the art of warfare. Today, 3 unlikely friends stood before the massive holographic display in Archive Chamber 7, their hearts racing with the thrill of forbidden discovery. ZYXandra, a tall Zolarian with iridescent blue skin and, for arms ending in delicate manipulator tendrils, traced the air above the central console with nervous energy. Her species had dominated galactic warfare for the past millennium, their lightning-fast reflexes and ability to operate multiple weapon systems simultaneously making them legendary among military academies. Yet today, her usually confident demeanor showed cracks of uncertainty. "The security algorithms are more complex than anything I've encountered," she whispered, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones characteristic of her people. "It's as if they don't just want to keep people out, they want to make sure nobody even thinks about trying to get in." Beside her, Korath, a massive reptilian Drachmori with obsidian scales and eyes like molten copper, shifted his considerable bulk impatiently. His species was known for their incredible physical strength and tactical brilliance in siege warfare. Standing nearly 8 feet tall with natural armor plating and retractable claws, he was the embodiment of everything the Academy taught about warrior excellence. "Perhaps we should reconsider this course of action," Korath rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. "The professors have made it clear that this particular archive is forbidden for reasons beyond our current understanding. My ancestors always taught that some knowledge comes with prices too steep to pay." The third member of their group, NYTH let out a soft chirping sound that served as laughter among her people. The diminutive Mothri stood barely 4 feet tall, her gossamer wings folded against her back as she worked at a secondary terminal. Despite her fragile appearance, the insectoid species was renowned for their unmatched intelligence and ability to process information at superhuman speeds. "Your caution is admirable, Korath, but misplaced," she replied, her compound eyes reflecting the dancing lights of the data streams flowing through her terminal. "We've spent 3 years studying every major conflict in galactic history. We've analyzed the territorial wars of the hegemony, the resource conflicts of the Outer Rim, even the philosophical battles of the transcendent collective. Yet there's one section that remains mysteriously absent from our curriculum." ZYXandra nodded, her manipulation tendrils dancing across multiple control surfaces simultaneously. "The period between Galactic Standard Years 2157 and 2203. 46 years of absolute silence in the historical record. No wars, no conflicts, no territorial disputes. It's as if the entire galaxy just stopped fighting." "Which is impossible," Korath added, his tactical mind working through the implications. "In recorded history, there has never been a period longer than 18 months without some form of organized conflict somewhere in known space. Peace isn't the natural state of the galaxy, conflict drives evolution, technological advancement, territorial expansion. It's the fundamental force that shapes civilizations." NYTHLR's wings buzzed softly with excitement as she accessed deeper layers of the archive system. "Exactly why this is so fascinating. According to the chronological records, this period of peace doesn't correlate with any known historical factors. No great plague that decimated populations, no technological breakthrough that made war obsolete, no philosophical movement that united disparate species. Just 46 years of inexplicable tranquility. The holographic display flickered as new security protocols engaged, but ZYXandra's four-armed advantage allowed her to navigate the countermeasures with fluid grace. And, look at this, she said, highlighting a series of data points. During those same 46 years, there's only one new species classification entry in the Galactic Directory. A single addition to the database that houses information on over 14,000 intelligent species. That can't be correct, Karath protested, leaning forward to examine the display more closely. First contact protocols alone require extensive documentation. Biological assessments, psychological profiles, technological evaluations, cultural analyses. The bureaucracy around a new species classification typically generates thousands of documents. NYTHLR's compound eyes glittered as she pulled up the sparse file. Precisely why this is so intriguing. Species designation, human. Origin world, Sol 3, locally designated Earth. Physical classification, bipedal mammalian. Technological level, early space exploration. Cultural designation, varied tribal structures transitioning to global unity. Combat status. She paused, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. Indefinitely suspended by unanimous council decree. The three students exchanged glances, the implications of those final words settling over them like a cold weight. In the entire history of the Galactic War Academy, no species had ever been classified with a suspended combat status. There were species too primitive for warfare, species too advanced to be bothered with territorial conflicts, and species so peaceful they refused to engage in combat. But suspension implied something else entirely, a conscious decision by the galactic community to prevent a species from participating in warfare. That's not just unusual, ZYXandra said slowly, her tendrils working across the interface with increasing urgency. According to galactic law, combat suspension can only be imposed in cases where a species poses an unacceptable threat to the stability of galactic civilization itself. Karatha's protective instincts warred with his curiosity. The last time such a designation was used was for the Void Swarm, nearly 3,000 years ago. They were classified as a galactic threat because they consumed entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty space in their wake. Are you suggesting that these humans represent a similar level of danger? I'm not suggesting anything, NYTHLR replied, her voice tight with concentration as she navigated deeper into the restricted files. I'm simply observing that we're looking at a classification that has only been used once before in recorded history, applied to a species that appears to be relatively primitive technologically and numerically insignificant compared to major galactic powers. The archive system suddenly shifted, new layers of encryption engaging as they pushed deeper into the classified materials. ZYXandra's four arms moved in perfect coordination, each one handling a different aspect of the security breach. There's something else, she said, pulling up a series of cross-referenced files. The suspension wasn't gradual. According to these timestamps, the entire classification was implemented within a single galactic standard day. Whatever caused the Council to make this decision happened fast. Emergency protocols, Karath recognized, his military training identifying the pattern. This is the electronic signature of a crisis response. Something happened that required immediate action across all member civilizations simultaneously. NYTHLR's wings began vibrating with increased frequency, a sign of intense mental processing among her people. Cross-referencing the timeline with known galactic events, there's only one incident that matches the temporal signature. The Nexus incident. Both her companions fell silent. Every student at the War Academy knew about the Nexus incident, though details were scarce. It was referenced in textbooks as the moment when the galaxy's major powers came together to establish the current peaceful protocols that governed interspecies relations. What they didn't know were the specific circumstances that had necessitated such unprecedented cooperation. The official record states that the Nexus incident was a diplomatic breakthrough, ZYXandra said slowly, pulling up the sanitized historical account they'd all memorized during their first year. Representatives from all major civilizations gathered to establish new frameworks for resolving conflicts through peaceful means. But that's not what actually happened, Karath realized, his tactical mind putting together the pieces. The timeline suggests this was a response to something specific. Something that terrified every major military power in the galaxy enough to completely restructure how interspecies conflicts are resolved. NYTHLR's compound eyes focused on something beyond the visible data streams. The humans, she whispered. The suspension order, the Nexus incident, the 46 years of unprecedented peace. It all centers around first contact with this one species. The archive chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of the quantum processors maintaining the holographic displays. Each of the three students was grappling with the implications of what they were discovering. In their years of military education, they had been taught that strength came from superior technology, tactical brilliance, overwhelming numbers, or evolutionary advantages. They had studied species that could manipulate matter at the atomic level, civilizations that could terraform entire worlds in decades, and warrior cultures that had perfected combat over millions of years of evolution. Yet here was evidence that a single, apparently primitive species had somehow caused the most powerful military minds in the galaxy to fundamentally alter their approach to warfare itself. "We need to access the restricted files," Zyxandra said finally, her voice carrying a determination that surprised even her. "Whatever these humans did, whatever happened during first contact, it's been deliberately hidden from us. As military students, we have a right to understand the full scope of galactic military history." Karatha's natural caution warred with his growing curiosity. The security around these files isn't just administrative bureaucracy. This is active concealment, the kind of information quarantine typically reserved for existential threats. If we're discovered accessing this material, it could mean expulsion from the academy, blacklisting from military service, possibly even criminal charges for breach of galactic security. Which tells us exactly how important this information is, NYTH pointed out, her analytical mind cutting through to the heart of the matter. They're not just keeping this from students, they're keeping it from the general public, from military personnel, possibly even from mid-level government officials. This level of classification suggests that knowledge of what humans are truly capable of is considered dangerous in itself. The three friends looked at each other, understanding passing between them without words. They had pushed too far to turn back now. Whatever they were about to discover would change their understanding of galactic history, military strategy, and, possibly, the fundamental nature of warfare itself. Zyxandra's forearms moved with renewed purpose across the control interfaces. "I'm going to attempt to access the core files. The encryption is unlike anything I've seen before. It's not just protecting the information, it's actively trying to discourage anyone from wanting to access it. There are subliminal deterrent algorithms woven into the security matrix." Psychological warfare applied to information security, Korath observed with grudging respect. "Sophisticated. They're not just trying to keep people out, they're trying to make people lose interest in trying to get in." NYTHLR's wings buzzed faster as she coordinated with Zyxandra's breach attempt. Which means whoever designed this system understood that the information inside was so significant that even the desire to access it had to be suppressed. "We're not just breaking into a restricted archive, we're breaking into something that was never meant to be accessed again by anyone." The holographic displays around them began shifting, new layers of information becoming visible as Zyxandra's technical skills overcame layer after layer of sophisticated security. What they saw made all three students take an involuntary step backward. The files weren't just classified, they were terrifying. Combat footage, tactical analyses, strategic assessments, and, most disturbing of all, detailed psychological profiles of an entire species that had been deemed too dangerous to be allowed to participate in galactic warfare. "By the ancient stars," Korath whispered, his voice barely audible. "What did these humans do?" As the first classified video file began to play, showing grainy footage of what appeared to be a small, unremarkable bipedal figure standing in what looked like a combat arena, none of them could have imagined that they were about to witness the reason why the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy had collectively agreed to pretend that true warfare no longer existed. The figure in the video began to move, and everything the three students thought they understood about combat, about strategy, about the very nature of conflict itself, was about to be shattered forever. The holographic projection stabilized, revealing a massive arena that dwarfed anything the students had seen in their military training facilities. The structure appeared to be carved from a single piece of black volcanic glass, its walls rising nearly a kilometer into a blood-red sky. Ancient symbols covered every surface, and the three students recognized them as belonging to the Kethmori Empire, a civilization that had dominated a significant portion of the galaxy over 4,000 years ago. "This footage is ancient," NYTHLR observed, her compound eyes analyzing the timestamp data streaming alongside the video. "Pre-contact era, based on the stellar configurations visible in the background. But, the image quality is remarkably clear for something this old." Zyxandra manipulated the display controls with her forearms, zooming in on the arena floor where dozens of figures moved in what appeared to be organized combat formations. The Kethmori were known for their gladiatorial competitions, she said, her voice carrying a note of academic fascination. They would capture representatives from various species and force them to fight for entertainment. It was one of their most effective psychological warfare tactics, demonstrating their superiority by showcasing the combat capabilities of their enemies. Karatha's tactical mind was already analyzing the arena layout. Look at the positioning of the viewing platforms. This wasn't just entertainment, it was intelligence gathering. Every angle of the arena floor is visible from multiple vantage points, allowing for comprehensive analysis of combat techniques, physical capabilities, and strategic thinking patterns. The video continued, showing what appeared to be a routine gladiatorial match between two well-known warrior species. The Threxnali, with their chitinous exoskeletons and razor-sharp mandibles, were fighting against a pair of Gorvanian berserkers, whose incredible regenerative abilities and pack hunting tactics had made them legendary throughout the galaxy. The match proceeded exactly as any military academy student would expect: brutal, efficient, and following predictable patterns based on each species' evolutionary advantages. Then, everything changed. A new section of the arena floor opened, and a single figure emerged. Even through the ancient recording medium, it was clear that this being was unlike any of the other combatants. Where the other species displayed obvious physical adaptations for warfare, natural armor, enhanced musculature, predatory features, this figure appeared almost disappointingly ordinary. Bipedal, approximately 1.8 meters in height, NYTHLRA read from the data analysis streaming beside the video. Minimal physical modifications for combat. No natural armor, no enhanced claws or teeth, no obvious sensory advantages. Biologically speaking, this appears to be one of the least combat-adapted species I've ever observed. The figure in the arena, clearly human, based on their earlier research, stood motionless as the Kethmori announcer's voice echoed through the massive space. The translation algorithms built into the archive system provided subtitles, revealing the contemptuous tone with which the human was being presented to the audience. Behold, citizens of the Empire, a specimen from the primitive world designated Sol 3. Captured during routine resource surveys, this creature represents the peak of evolution from a world so insignificant that it barely registers on our star charts. Watch now as we demonstrate the futility of resistance against the might of the Kethmori. The human remained still as weapons were distributed to the other combatants. The Threxnali received traditional battle spears, their natural agility allowing them to wield the weapons with deadly precision. The Gorvanians were given heavy war clubs, perfect for their berserker fighting style. The human was offered a selection of weapons from various species and, to the obvious amusement of the crowd, selected a simple metal rod barely a meter in length. "This is going to be a massacre," Zyxandra whispered, her tendrils twitching with involuntary sympathy for the obviously outmatched human. "That weapon choice makes no tactical sense. Against opponents with reach and natural armor, a short-range weapon with no cutting edge is essentially useless." Karath nodded grimly. The Kethmori probably chose this particular human because they knew it would provide good entertainment value. A quick, overwhelming defeat to demonstrate their superiority over yet another primitive species. The arena gates closed, sealing all the combatants inside. What happened next would haunt the three students' nightmares for the rest of their lives. The human moved. It wasn't the movement of desperation or panic that they expected from a clearly outmatched opponent. It wasn't the wild charging of a berserker or the calculated positioning of a trained warrior. It was something else entirely fluid, economical, and absolutely terrifying in its precision. The first Threxnali warrior charged, its natural speed allowing it to close the distance in a fraction of a second, spear aimed directly at the human center mass. The thrust was perfect, delivered with all the accumulated skill of a species that had evolved for combat over millions of years. The human wasn't there. Not dodged, not blocked, not parried. Simply not there. The spear passed through empty space where the human had been standing a microsecond earlier. Before the Threxnali could recover from its committed attack, the human's simple metal rod struck once, precisely, at a joint in the alien's natural armor. The crack of breaking chitin echoed through the arena as the warrior collapsed instantly, its nervous system severed by a strike that had targeted the one vulnerable point in its otherwise impenetrable exoskeleton. Impossible, Karath breathed, his own combat experience telling him that what he had just witnessed was beyond the capabilities of any known species. That level of precision, that speed, that anatomical knowledge, there's no way a primitive species could possess such advanced combat capabilities. The second Threx nearly attacked from behind, its approach silent and deadly. The human's response was to continue moving forward, the metal rod striking backward without the human even turning to look. Another precise strike, another vulnerable joint, another instant kill. NYTHLR's wings were buzzing so rapidly they were creating a high-pitched whine. The human isn't even looking at its opponents, she said, her voice tight with disbelief. It's tracking their movements through sound, air displacement, maybe even electromagnetic fields. That level of sensory integration is theoretically possible but practically impossible to achieve without technological assistance. The two Gorvanian berserkers attacked together, their pack-hunting instincts perfectly coordinated after centuries of evolutionary refinement. Their approach was flawless, one high, one low, timing their strikes to make dodging impossible while their regenerative abilities made them essentially immune to counterattack. The human killed them both before they could complete their first strike. The movements were too fast for the arena's recording equipment to capture clearly, but the result was unmistakable. Two of the galaxy's most feared predatory species lay motionless on the arena floor, killed by strikes so precise they had bypassed the Gorvanian's legendary regenerative capabilities entirely. The arena fell silent. The crowd of Kathmori spectators, who had been cheering for what they expected to be an entertaining massacre, stared in shocked silence at the human standing calmly in the center of the arena floor, surrounded by the bodies of species that had terrorized star systems for millennia. "This is just the beginning," Zyxandra whispered, her academic knowledge of galactic military history providing context for what they were witnessing. "The Kathmori Empire fell approximately 3,900 years ago. If humans were capable of this level of combat effectiveness back then..." She didn't need to finish the thought. All three students understood the implications. For 1,000 years of technological advancement, tactical development, and strategic evolution, applied to a species that was already capable of defeating the galaxy's most feared warriors with primitive weapons and no apparent effort. The video continued, showing the aftermath of the arena battle. Kathmori scientists and military analysts swarmed over the footage, their own advanced recording equipment capturing every microsecond of the human's movement for detailed analysis. The commentary stream revealed their growing horror as they began to understand what they had witnessed. Initial analysis suggests the subject possesses reaction times approximately 40% faster than theoretically possible for a carbon-based lifeform of its size and neural complexity, one scientist reported, his voice trembling with barely controlled fear. Secondary analysis indicates the subject demonstrated complete anatomical knowledge of species it had never encountered before, suggesting either impossible pattern recognition capabilities or precognitive tactical assessment. Another voice joined the discussion, this one from a military strategist whose credentials marked him as one of the Kathmori Empire's most respected tactical minds. More disturbing than its combat capabilities is its psychological profile. Throughout the engagement, the subject showed no signs of adrenaline response, no elevated stress indicators, no emotional engagement with the combat situation. It approached lethal combat with the same physiological markers as routine physical exercise. The three students exchanged horrified glances as the implications sank in. They were watching footage of a human treating deadly combat, fighting against species that had been the stuff of nightmares for civilizations across the galaxy, as if it were no more challenging or emotionally significant than taking a casual walk. "The subject appears to have been deliberately restraining itself," a third Kathmori analyst added, his voice barely above a whisper. "Kinetic analysis suggests that every strike was calculated to use the absolute minimum force necessary to achieve its objective. This wasn't a desperate fight for survival, this was a demonstration of controlled, precise violence applied with surgical efficiency." The video shifted to show interrogation footage of the human captured after the arena battle. The figure sat calmly in what was obviously a high-security containment cell, surrounded by energy barriers and monitoring equipment that represented the pinnacle of Kathmori military technology. When questioned about its combat performance, the human's response sent chills through the three students watching thousands of years later. "You wanted to know what we were capable of," the human said, its voice carrying no trace of boasting or threat, just simple statement of fact. "I showed you. That was me being gentle. That was me trying not to hurt anyone more than absolutely necessary. You really don't want to see what happens when we stop being gentle." The interrogation footage ended abruptly, but the timestamp indicated that questioning had continued for several months. The final entry in the Kathmori archives was a single, desperate transmission sent to all allied civilizations throughout their sphere of influence. Emergency Protocol 7 is now in effect. All military operations in Sector 7 are to be suspended immediately. Request immediate diplomatic contact with species designation human. Do not, under any circumstances, engage in hostile contact with this species. Do not capture their representatives. Do not threaten their territory. Repeat, do not engage. This is not a military advisory, this is a survival protocol. The transmission was followed by a list of coordinates marking the location of every Kethmori military installation in a region spanning dozens of star systems. Every single installation showed the same status, abandoned. Karatha's warrior instincts were screaming warnings as he processed the footage they had just witnessed. An entire military empire, one that had dominated the galaxy for centuries, evacuated an entire sector of space because of first contact with a single human representative. NYTHLR's analytical mind was racing through the implications. The Kethmori Empire had faced thousands of different species over their history. They had defeated warrior cultures, technological civilizations, hive minds, energy beings, and dimensional entities. Nothing had ever made them retreat before. ZYXandra was already accessing the next set of files, her forearms working frantically across the control interfaces. This is just one incident, she said, her voice tight with growing dread. The archive contains hundreds of similar reports from dozens of different civilizations. First contact protocols, military assessments, diplomatic initiatives, all ending the same way. The next video file began to load, this one from the archives of the Quantum Collective, a civilization so advanced they existed partially outside normal spacetime. The timestamp indicated this footage was from approximately 2,800 years ago, over a millennium after the Kethmori incident. As the new footage resolved, showing another arena-style combat demonstration, all three students realized they were about to discover that the human they had just watched was not an exceptional individual among its species. It was average. And that realization was going to change everything they thought they knew about the nature of warfare, violence, and what it truly meant to be a predator in a galaxy full of killers. The Quantum Collective's archives painted a picture of a civilization so advanced that they had transcended traditional concepts of physical reality. Their cities existed in folded spacetime, their technology operated on principles that bent the fundamental laws of physics, and their military capabilities included weapons that could unravel matter at the subatomic level. They had observed the rise and fall of countless civilizations from their position outside normal dimensional space, intervening only when galactic stability itself was threatened. The footage began with a formal diplomatic meeting in what appeared to be a crystalline chamber that existed in several dimensions simultaneously. The visual effect was disorienting even through the filtered recording. Surfaces that seemed solid from one angle became transparent from another, while architectural elements shifted and flowed like liquid mathematics. Representatives of the Quantum Collective, a voice announced, the translation matrix struggling with concepts that didn't translate well into linear language. We convened this session to assess the military capabilities of the species that has generated unprecedented response patterns across 17 different galactic civilizations. NYTHLR paused the recording, her compound eyes analyzing the data streams accompanying the video. This is remarkable, she said, her voice filled with scientific fascination. The Quantum Collective existed partially outside normal time. They could observe causality streams, potential futures based on current decisions. If they were convening a formal assessment of human military capabilities, they were seeing potential timelines where humans posed a threat to galactic stability itself, Karath finished, his tactical mind grasping the implications immediately. Beings who could literally see the future were worried about what humanity might become. ZYXandra resumed the playback, her forearms steady despite the growing tension in the archive chamber. The scene shifted to show a human representative being led into the crystalline meeting space. Unlike the captured gladiator in the Kethmori arena, this human appeared to be a willing participant in some kind of formal diplomatic exchange. The human was unremarkable by galactic standards, medium height, standard bipedal configuration, no obvious evolutionary adaptations for combat. What made the three students lean forward in their seats was the reaction of the Quantum Collective representatives. Beings who existed partially outside of normal reality, who had observed the birth and death of stars as casual phenomena, were displaying what could only be described as nervous caution. State your designation for the record, one of the collective's representatives requested, its form shifting between various geometric configurations as it spoke. Commander Sarah Chan, United Earth Colonial Defense Force, the human replied calmly. I'm here as requested to demonstrate standard military capabilities for assessment and diplomatic classification. Standard capabilities, ZYXandra whispered, her tendrils twitching with growing apprehension. They're treating what we saw in the Kethmori arena as standard. The demonstration area materialized around them, a space that seemed to exist in several dimensions simultaneously. Holographic opponents began appearing, not recordings or projections, but perfect quantum simulations of the galaxy's most feared warrior species. Kethmori shock troops, Phrexnali assassins, Drakmori siege warriors, and dozens of other species that had dominated galactic warfare for millennia. The simulations are perfect quantum duplicates, NYTHLARA observed, reading the technical specifications streaming alongside the video. Not approximations or estimates, these are identical to living representatives in every measurable way, including psychological profiles and combat experience. Commander Chin examined the selection of weapons available, an array that included the most advanced military technology from dozens of civilizations. Plasma rifles that could melt through starship armor, molecular disruptors that could unravel matter at the atomic level, quantum swords that could cut through dimensional barriers themselves. She selected a simple kinetic projectile weapon, what the archive database identified as a rifle from human military terminology. "This is concerning," Korath muttered, his warrior instincts recognizing the pattern. Advanced opponents, access to superior technology, and she chooses the most primitive weapon available. It's the same psychological profile as the arena fighter. The demonstration began with a single opponent, a Kethmori shock trooper, its natural armor enhanced with military-grade energy shields and armed with plasma weapons capable of devastating entire city blocks. The quantum simulation was perfect, incorporating millions of years of evolutionary combat optimization and centuries of advanced military training. Commander Chen shot at once. A single projectile, fired from a weapon that any galactic military academy would classify as obsolete. The Kethmori trooper, protected by armor that could withstand direct hits from starship weapons, collapsed instantly. "Impossible," Zyxandra breathed, her forearms frozen above the control interfaces. "Energy shields don't just stop working because of kinetic impact. The physics doesn't support what we just observed." The demonstration continued with increasing numbers of opponents. Two Phrexnali assassins, their natural stealth capabilities enhanced with technological cloaking devices. For Drakmori warriors, their tactical coordination perfect and their weapons capable of reducing mountains to rubble. 8 Gorvanian berserkers, their regenerative abilities boosted to supernatural levels. Commander Chen eliminated each wave with the same methodical precision they had witnessed in the arena footage. Single shots, perfect accuracy, and opponents who represented the pinnacle of galactic military evolution falling like harvested crops. But what truly horrified the three students wasn't the efficiency of the kills, it was the growing realization that Commander Chen wasn't even trying. "Observe her physiological indicators," NYTHLARA said, her voice barely audible as she analyzed the biometric data streaming alongside the combat footage. Heart rate, steady. Respiration, normal. Stress hormones, baseline levels. She's treating this like target practice. The quantum collective representatives were conferring among themselves, their forms shifting rapidly between configurations as they processed what they were witnessing. The translation matrix captured fragments of their communication. Probability matrices are approaching undefined values. Combat efficiency exceeds theoretical maximums for carbon-based neural architecture. Tactical analysis suggests subject is operating at approximately 12% of estimated capability. The final test involved 50 opponents attacking simultaneously, an assault force that could have conquered entire star systems. Commander Chen's response was to calmly adjust something on her weapon and fire a single shot. Every opponent fell simultaneously. Kinetic cascade effect, the archive's technical analysis explained in clinical terms. Subject demonstrated ability to calculate ricochet patterns across multiple dimensional vectors, using environmental surfaces to redirect kinetic energy through impossible geometric paths. Single projectile achieved 53 separate impact events through controlled dimensional reflection. The Quantum Collective's emergency session that followed the demonstration was classified at levels that required additional security breaches to access. Zyxandra's technical skills were pushed to their limits as she navigated through encryption protocols that existed partially outside normal spacetime. "The probability streams are converging on unacceptable outcomes," one collective representative reported, its form now locked into a rigid geometric pattern that suggested extreme stress. "If this species continues to develop militarily at observed rates, galactic civilization faces existential threat within 847 years. Correction," another added, its voice carrying harmonics that made the student's equipment vibrate uncomfortably. Previous calculation assumed linear development. Observing current innovation patterns and adaptability coefficients, threat assessment timeline reduces to 312 years. Secondary correction, a third voice interrupted, causing several of the recording systems to temporarily fail. Assessment assumes humans remain confined to their current technological base. If they achieve faster than light travel and begin military expansion. The voice paused, and, when it resumed, the fear was unmistakable even across the translation matrix. Threat timeline collapses to 47 years. The three students sat in stunned silence as they processed the implications. The quantum collective, beings who existed outside normal time and could observe probability streams across the entire galaxy, had calculated that human military expansion posed an existential threat to galactic civilization itself. Karatha's tactical mind was working through the strategic implications. They weren't just worried about human combat capabilities, he said slowly. They were terrified of human adaptability. Every species we've studied has military advantages based on evolutionary specialization. Humans appear to be evolutionary generalists who can learn and adapt to any combat situation. It's worse than that, Nythlra replied, her analytical processing revealing patterns in the data that chilled her to her core. Look at the learning curve analysis from the demonstration. Commander Chen wasn't just displaying existing capabilities, she was improving in real time. Each engagement showed marginal increases in efficiency, tactical adaptation, and technical innovation. Zyxandra had accessed additional files from the Quantum Collective archives, and what she found made her forearms tremble. They didn't just study human military capabilities, she said, her voice tight with growing horror. They studied human psychology, human history, human culture. The conclusions they reached. The psychological profile that appeared on the holographic display was unlike anything in the Academy's xenopsychology databases. Where other species showed clear patterns of aggression triggers, territorial instincts, or predatory behaviors, humans displayed something far more disturbing: controlled violence as a tool applied with surgical precision. Subject species demonstrates unique psychological profile, the Quantum Collective's report stated. Unlike other predatory species, humans do not appear to engage in violence for territorial, resource-based, or biological imperative reasons. Instead, violence is applied as a calculated tool for achieving specific objectives, with emotional engagement deliberately suppressed for optimal efficiency. They don't fight because they're angry, or because they're defending territory, or because they're hunting for resources, Karath said, his voice filled with dawning horror. They fight because they've calculated that violence is the most efficient solution to whatever problem they're facing. The report continued with analysis that made all three students question everything they had learned about the nature of warfare. Humans didn't just excel at combat, they excelled at everything that made combat effective. Intelligence gathering, logistics, technological innovation, psychological warfare, strategic planning, and, most terrifying of all, the ability to convince other species to fight alongside them. Cultural analysis reveals unprecedented capacity for inspiring loyalty in other species, the psychological profile noted. Humans demonstrate ability to form military alliances that transcend traditional species barriers, creating multi-species fighting forces that operate with coordination levels typically seen only within singular species military units. Nythlra's wings buzzed with increasing frequency as she processed the implications. They don't just win by being better fighters, she said. They win by making their enemies want to become their allies. They weaponize friendship. The final entry in the Quantum Collective archives was a formal recommendation transmitted to every advanced civilization in the galaxy. The language was careful, diplomatic, but the underlying message was unmistakable. Species designation: human represents unprecedented variable in galactic stability calculations. Recommendation: immediate implementation of peaceful contact protocols. Under no circumstances should this species be threatened, challenged, or provided with motivation for military expansion. Probability analysis indicates that any action resulting in human military mobilization will result in galactic civilization collapse within acceptable probability margins. The recommendation was followed by a detailed plan for what would later become known as the Nexus Accords, a complete restructuring of galactic civilization designed around a single, terrifying principle: never give humans a reason to stop being peaceful. As the three students sat in the darkened archive chamber, surrounded by evidence that their entire understanding of galactic history was based on a carefully maintained lie, they began to realize that their discovery was going to change everything. Because if humans were this dangerous 4,000 years ago, What had they become now, after millennia of enforced peace had allowed them to focus all their adaptability and innovation on pursuits other than warfare? And, more terrifyingly, what would happen if something finally gave them a reason to remember what they were truly capable of? The deeper layers of the archive revealed a chilling pattern that sent waves of terror through the three students. It wasn't just the Kethmori Empire and the Quantum Collective that had encountered humans. Over the course of nearly 2,000 years, every major galactic civilization had faced the same horrifying realization: humanity represented an existential threat to the established order of the universe itself. Xandra's forearms worked frantically across multiple control interfaces as she accessed files from civilizations that had dominated different eras of galactic history. The Transcendent Hive, the Crystal Mathematics Empire, the Void Shepherds, the Infinite Library Collective each had left behind detailed documentation of their encounters with humanity, and each had reached the same terrifying conclusions. "Look at this timeline," she said, her voice trembling as she highlighted a chronological display spanning 4 millennia. Every single major galactic power has faced the same crisis point. First contact with humans leads to immediate military assessment, which leads to psychological evaluation, which leads to the same desperate conclusion. The Transcendent Hive's files were particularly disturbing because of the species' unique perspective. As a collective consciousness spanning billions of individual minds, they possessed computational capabilities that allowed them to process information and predict outcomes with near-perfect accuracy. Their assessment of human military potential was mathematically precise and absolutely terrifying. Individual human consciousness demonstrates unprecedented tactical flexibility, the Hive's analysis reported. Unlike collective intelligences, which excel at coordination but struggle with adaptation, or singular intelligences, which excel at innovation but struggle with coordination, humans appear capable of seamlessly transitioning between individual and group tactical thinking as situations demand. NYTHLR's compound eyes focused on technical specifications that made no sense according to everything they had learned about biological limitations. "This is impossible," she whispered. According to the Hive's analysis, humans can function as perfectly coordinated units when necessary, but also demonstrate complete tactical independence when coordination becomes a liability. No species should be able to master both approaches simultaneously. The video files from the Hive's encounters with humanity showed something that redefined their understanding of military psychology. Human military units operating with perfect coordination, each individual anticipating the actions of their teammates with precision that rivaled true Hive minds. But, when separated, those same individuals demonstrated tactical creativity and independent problem-solving that exceeded the capabilities of the galaxy's most innovative singular species. "They're not just good at fighting," Korath realized, his warrior instincts recognizing patterns that chilled him to his core. "They're good at learning how to fight. Every encounter, every battle, every conflict makes them better at all subsequent conflicts." The Crystal Mathematics Empire's files revealed an even more disturbing aspect of human military capability. As a civilization based on pure mathematical logic, they approached warfare as a series of equations to be solved. Their analysis of human tactical thinking revealed something that shouldn't have been possible according to their understanding of neural architecture. Human strategic planning appears to operate on multiple probability matrices simultaneously, their report stated. Standard military thinking follows linear progression: assess situation, formulate plan, implement tactics. Human military thinking demonstrates ability to maintain dozens of contingency plans simultaneously, adapting in real time as battlefield conditions change. The supporting video showed human military commanders managing what appeared to be impossible tactical situations. Outnumbered, outgunned, facing enemies with superior technology and natural advantages, yet somehow orchestrating victories through combinations of strategy, psychology, and sheer tactical innovation that defied mathematical prediction. "They don't just win battles," Xandra said, her voice barely audible as she analyzed the tactical breakdowns provided by the Crystal Mathematics Empire. "They win battles that they should lose, against opponents who should be superior, using strategies that shouldn't work. And they do it consistently." The most disturbing revelation came from the Void Shepherds, a species that existed primarily in interdimensional space and possessed the ability to observe reality from perspectives outside normal spacetime. Their assessment of humanity wasn't based on direct combat observation, but on analysis of humanity's potential impact on the fundamental structure of galactic civilization. Species demonstrates unprecedented capacity for cultural adaptation and technological integration, their report noted. Unlike other species, which maintain stable cultural patterns across millennia, humans appear capable of incorporating beneficial elements from any culture they encounter while maintaining core identity coherence. The implications were staggering. Every other species in the galaxy maintained their distinct cultures, technologies, and military approaches across thousands of years of evolution. Humans, according to the Void Shepherd's analysis, absorbed and integrated the best aspects of every civilization they encountered, becoming stronger and more adaptable with each contact. They don't just defeat other species militarily, NYTH said, her analytical mind processing the cultural implications. They integrate their advantages. Every species they encounter makes them more capable of defeating the next species they encounter. The archive contained footage of human settlements from various periods throughout galactic history, showing communities that incorporated architectural principles from dozens of different species, technological innovations from hundreds of different civilizations, and social structures that seemed to seamlessly blend advantages from across the galaxy. "Look at this," Korath said, highlighting military formations in the settlement footage. Human combat units incorporating Threx-Nayli speed tactics, Kethmori armor designs, Drakmori siege strategies, and Gorvanian pack hunting patterns. But they're not just copying, they're improving on each approach. The most chilling discovery came from the Infinite Library Collective, a civilization that existed to preserve and catalog all knowledge in the galaxy. Their archives contain detailed projections of human development based on observed learning curves and adaptation rates. Current trajectory analysis indicates species will achieve technological singularity within 500 standard years, their projections stated. However, unlike predicted singularities for other species, human technological advancement appears directed toward optimization of conflict resolution rather than transcendence of physical limitations. The projection continued with calculations that made all three students question the fundamental nature of reality itself. According to the Library Collective's models, humans weren't developing technology to transcend warfare, they were developing technology to become so terrifyingly effective at warfare that conflict would become meaningless. Projected outcome: species will develop capabilities that make military resistance impossible for any known galactic civilization. Not through overwhelming firepower, but through perfect strategic efficiency. Conflicts will be resolved before opposing forces can recognize they are engaged in combat. Zyxandra accessed the final layer of the archives, her forearms trembling as she navigated through security protocols that seemed designed to prevent anyone from ever viewing this information. What she found was a collection of testimonials from the galaxy's most respected military strategists, philosophers, and scientists, all reaching the same conclusion about humanity's place in galactic civilization. "We have analyzed thousands of species across millions of years," one testimony began. "We have studied civilizations that could manipulate stars, entities that existed across multiple dimensions, and hive minds spanning entire galaxies. None of them posed the existential challenge that humanity represents. The problem isn't that humans are good at warfare," another strategist explained. "The problem is that humans treat warfare as just another problem to be solved, and they appear to be incapable of encountering a problem they cannot eventually solve. Every species has limitations," a third testimonial continued. "Biological constraints, technological barriers, psychological patterns that can be predicted and exploited. Humans appear to view limitations as temporary inconveniences to be overcome through adaptation and innovation." The final testimonial came from a joint committee representing every major galactic civilization, dated just before the implementation of the Nexus Accords. "Humanity must never be allowed to develop beyond their current technological and military limitations. Not because they are evil, not because they are aggressive, but because they are too good at solving problems. If they ever perceive galactic civilization as a problem to be solved, they will solve it. And their solution will reshape the galaxy according to their preferences, not ours." The three students sat in absolute silence as they processed the full scope of what they had discovered. The Nexus Accords, the peaceful resolution protocols, the ban on military conflict, none of it was designed to prevent warfare between galactic civilizations. It was all designed to prevent humans from having any reason to develop their military capabilities beyond their current level. "The 46 years of unprecedented peace," NYTH whispered, her compound eyes reflecting the data streams around them. "It wasn't because the galaxy learned to resolve conflicts peacefully. It was because every major civilization was terrified of giving humans an excuse to start solving galactic problems militarily. And now?" Korath asked, his tactical mind working through the implications. "What happens now that we know the truth? What happens when other people learn what humans are really capable of? Xandra was already accessing current intelligence files, her forearms moving across the control interfaces with desperate urgency. What she found made her freeze in absolute terror. According to current galactic census data, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, human population has increased by 400% since the Nexus Accords were implemented. Their technological development has accelerated exponentially, but it's all been focused on peaceful applications, medicine, infrastructure, terraforming, space exploration. For 1,000 years of enforced peace, Nythl said, her analytical mind calculating the implications. For 1,000 years of humans developing their problem-solving capabilities without any military focus. For 1,000 years of them becoming better at adaptation, innovation, and integration. The final piece of data that Xandra accessed sent all three students into a state of complete panic. Current diplomatic files showed increasing tensions between several galactic civilizations, territorial disputes that were beginning to strain the peaceful resolution protocols that had maintained galactic stability for millennia. The Nexus Accords are starting to break down, she said, her forearms now shaking uncontrollably. Several civilizations are beginning to question why they should be bound by agreements that prevent them from expanding their territories. There are rumors of military buildups, secret weapons development, plans for territorial expansion. Which means, Karath concluded with dawning horror, that someone is about to give humanity a very good reason to start solving galactic problems the way they used to solve them. As the three students looked at each other in the flickering light of the holographic displays, they realized that they had uncovered more than just classified historical information. They had discovered that galactic civilization was built on a foundation of terror, maintained through a conspiracy of silence, and was now on the verge of collapse. And, when it collapsed, humanity would remember what they had been before 4,000 years of peace had made them forget their true nature. The galaxy was about to rediscover why the most dangerous species in the universe was the one that had been convinced to put away its weapons. The emergency protocols that activated throughout the Galactic War Academy's systems were unlike anything the three students had ever experienced. Security algorithms that had laid dormant for millennia suddenly engaged, sealing archive chambers and sending priority alerts across multiple star systems. The truth they had uncovered was not meant to remain hidden indefinitely, it was meant to serve as a warning system. The entire archive was a trap, Xandra realized, her forearms working frantically to maintain access as sophisticated containment protocols attempted to lock them out. They wanted someone to eventually discover this information, but only when galactic stability was already in jeopardy. Emergency broadcasts began flooding communication networks across known space. Military installations that had been dormant for thousands of years suddenly activated. Diplomatic channels that had been used only for routine peaceful negotiations were now carrying messages marked with threat classifications that hadn't been used since the implementation of the Nexus Accords. Nythl's compound eyes reflected the cascade of emergency communications streaming through the Academy's monitoring systems. It's happening exactly as the projections predicted, she said, her voice tight with growing panic. The breakdown of peaceful resolution protocols is accelerating. The Hegemony Alliance just issued an ultimatum regarding territorial expansion rights. The Crystal Mathematics Empire is demanding resource allocation adjustments that violate the Nexus Accords. And, look at this, Karath added, his warrior instincts immediately recognizing the patterns in the military communications they were intercepting. Secret weapon development programs that have been hidden for centuries are suddenly being activated. Everyone kept just enough military capability to survive the transition back to warfare, but they've been hiding it from each other. The three students watched in horror as the galaxy they had grown up in, a peaceful, stable civilization based on diplomatic resolution and cooperative resource sharing, revealed itself to be an elaborate facade hiding thousands of years of suppressed military ambition. But the most terrifying revelation was yet to come. Deep within the classified files they had accessed was a final protocol, one that had never been intended for discovery by galactic citizens. It was a communication system designed to automatically activate when certain threat thresholds were exceeded, sending signals to coordinates that corresponded to the Sol system. They'd been watching, Xandra whispered, her tendrils frozen above the control interfaces as she stared at the communication logs. Every breakdown in galactic stability, every violation of the Nexus Accords, every sign that the galaxy might be returning to military conflict, it's all been automatically reported to humanity. The implications crashed over them like a tidal wave of terror. For 4,000 years, humanity had been isolated, kept peaceful through a combination of diplomatic misdirection and careful management of galactic information. They had been told that the galaxy was peaceful, that conflicts were resolved through negotiation, that warfare was a relic of primitive civilizations. But, the galaxy's leaders had been keeping humanity informed of everything, preparing them for the possibility that their enforced peace might someday end. Current intelligence suggests that humanity has been using the peace period exactly as the projections predicted, NYTHLR said, accessing files that revealed the true scope of human development over the past 4 millennia. Population expansion to over 400 worlds, technological development focused on logistics and resource management, and, most terrifying of all, military education disguised as historical studies and recreational activities. The files showed that human civilization had developed what they called strategic gaming and tactical simulations that were actually sophisticated military training programs. Humans had been practicing warfare for thousands of years, thinking they were engaged in entertainment and intellectual exercise. Every human child grew up learning strategic thinking, tactical analysis, and resource management through what they believed were games and educational activities. They never stopped being warriors, Karath realized with dawning horror. They just stopped knowing they were warriors. For 1,000 years of peace, and they've been unconsciously developing the most sophisticated military training system in galactic history. The communication system that connected galactic leadership to humanity activated before their eyes, sending real-time updates about the breakdown of the Nexus Accords to coordinates deep within human space. The response that came back made all 3 students understand that their discovery had triggered something that could not be stopped. Message received and analyzed, the response stated in the simple, direct language that characterized human communication. Galactic stability parameters have exceeded acceptable thresholds. Peaceful resolution protocols have failed. Alternative solutions are being implemented. Alternative solutions, ZYXandra repeated, her voice barely audible as she accessed additional files that revealed what humanity had been preparing for during their millennia of enforced peace. They'd been ready for this moment since the Nexus Accords were first implemented. The files showed that human civilization had spent 4,000 years developing technologies, strategies, and capabilities that had no apparent practical application in a peaceful galaxy. Propulsion systems capable of moving entire fleets across galactic distances in days instead of years. Communication networks that could coordinate military operations across hundreds of star systems simultaneously. Resource management systems capable of supporting military campaigns on an unprecedented scale. But, most terrifying of all was the revelation of humanity's true population and distribution. The census data that showed humans on 400 worlds was fabricated. The real number was closer to 40,000 worlds, with a total population that exceeded the combined population of every other galactic civilization. They've been hiding their true expansion for millennia, NYTHLR said, her analytical mind struggling to process the scope of human preparation. Every piece of information the galaxy has about human development has been carefully managed to maintain the illusion of a small, peaceful, technologically limited civilization. The first signs of humanity's response began appearing on galactic monitoring systems within hours of the communication being sent. Ships appeared at the edge of known space, not the small exploration vessels that characterized human activity for the past 4,000 years, but massive constructs that registered on sensors as being larger than most space stations. Fleet composition analysis indicates vessels designed for rapid deployment of large-scale military operations, the Academy's tactical systems reported. Estimated capacity, 2.3 million personnel per vessel. Current count, 847 vessels and increasing. Karatha's tactical mind was reeling as he calculated the implications. Nearly 2 billion military personnel just entered known galactic space, and the count is still rising. This isn't a military response, this is the largest invasion force in galactic history. Correction, a new voice said, causing all 3 students to spin around in terror. A human figure had appeared in the archive chamber, somehow bypassing every security system in the Academy without triggering a single alarm. The human was unremarkable by the standards they had learned from the historical files: average height, standard bipedal configuration, wearing what appeared to be a simple uniform marked with symbols they didn't recognize. But, after everything they had discovered, the 3 students understood exactly how dangerous the figure standing before them truly was. This isn't an invasion force, the human said calmly, its voice carrying the same emotionless precision they had observed in the historical recordings. This is a peacekeeping operation. The galaxy has demonstrated that it cannot maintain stability through diplomatic means, so we're implementing alternative stability protocols. ZYXandra's forearms trembled as she attempted to access the Academy's emergency communication systems, only to discover that they were no longer responding to her commands. "You've taken control of the Academy's systems," she said, stating the obvious with the calm precision of someone in shock. "We've taken control of all systems," the human corrected. "Communication networks, defensive installations, governmental facilities, resource distribution centers. The transition will be as smooth as possible, but it is not optional." NYTHLR's compound eyes reflected the data streams that were now flowing through the Academy systems, showing a real-time map of human operations across the galaxy. Every major civilization's capital world now showed human vessels in orbit. Every military installation was surrounded. Every government facility was under what appeared to be protective custody. "The Nexus Accords," she whispered. "You're not violating them. You're enforcing them." "Exactly," the human replied, its expression never changing from calm professionalism. "The Accords were designed to maintain galactic peace. When diplomatic enforcement proved insufficient, alternative enforcement became necessary." Karatha's warrior instincts were screaming at him to fight, to resist, to do something other than stand there accepting what was happening. But his tactical mind understood that resistance was not just futile, it was impossible. Humanity had spent 4,000 years preparing for this moment, developing capabilities that made opposition meaningless. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice carrying the defeat of someone who had spent their life training for warfare only to discover that warfare itself was obsolete. "Now the galaxy learns to maintain peace without external enforcement," the human replied. "You will continue your studies, become military leaders, and help your species adapt to the new stability protocols. The only difference is that those protocols will now be maintained by a species that specializes in solving problems." The human began to fade from visibility, its presence revealed to be some form of advanced projection technology. "Your discovery of the archives was not accidental," it said as its image grew translucent. "You were selected based on psychological profiles that indicated you would be capable of helping your species understand the transition. Use that understanding wisely." As the projection disappeared, the three students found themselves alone in the archive chamber, surrounded by the evidence of humanity's true nature and faced with the reality of what the galaxy had become. The peaceful civilization they had grown up in was over, replaced by something that was simultaneously more stable and infinitely more terrifying. "They solved it," Zyxandra said finally, her voice carrying a mixture of awe and horror. "The problem of galactic instability. They solved it permanently." Through the Academy's windows, they could see human vessels maintaining perfect formation in the planet's orbit, their presence both protective and controlling. The galaxy was at peace, would remain at peace, and would be maintained in peace by the only species that had ever been truly dangerous enough to enforce peace through strength. The three students had uncovered the terrifying reason why humans were barred from war, not because they were bad at it, but because they were so good at it that allowing them to practice warfare would have ended the concept of warfare itself. And now, faced with the breakdown of diplomatic alternatives, humanity had finally been given permission to solve the galaxy's problems the only way they had ever truly known how, completely, permanently, and with the kind of terrifying efficiency that made resistance not just impossible, but unthinkable. The age of galactic warfare was over. The age of human peacekeeping had begun. And, somewhere in the depths of space, the rest of humanity's fleet was still arriving, ensuring that the peace they had just established would last for another 4,000 years. Whether the galaxy wanted it or not.